So much of how we live is determined by politicians. For me, national politics is broken. Where we've got to, a national politics that isn't about actually making people's lives better, it's about serving individual desires for power and success. The mayor's responsibility is making sure that 16-year-old girls aren't strip searched at school. The mayor's responsibility is climate resilience in London. The mayor's job is arts and culture. These things are the mayor's responsibility, but we don't seem to be talking about them as the mayor's responsibility.
Hitting a place of rock bottom and bouncing back by seeing that you can't ever be broker than broke, to entrepreneurship, running businesses, and now running for London Mayor, so you remember where you can cast your vote.
I'm not gonna lie, I got into bed for like 3 days and cried. And then I was like, right, woman up. When you operate from fear, it's the fastest way to kill anything good, because you start making bad decisions. You can't take people with you because you're in fear mode. So for someone like me, a CEO, an entrepreneur that's about doing things, national government and politics doesn't work, because you don't actually get to do anything, because you have to spend the whole time thinking about what's in it for me.
Greetings, I'm Ashley Samuels Mackenzie.
And I'm Charles Parkinson.
And welcome to How I Became,
where we unveil the unscripted journeys of inspirational figures.
If you enjoy the show, could you do one thing? Subscribe. Wherever you are, just click the subscribe or follow button. That simple act can help us grow the podcast in a big way, and we need your support to do it. And if you really want to help play a part in our growth, rate us on Spotify or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It would mean the world. Thank you. This episode is brought to you by Uber, shaping the future for consumers as they go anywhere and get anything. Advertising on Uber connects brands with hundreds of millions of people using Uber around the world in the moments that move them most. To learn more about what we can do for your brand, visit uber.com/advertising.
Hi, I'm Natalie Campbell, and this is How I Became, co-CEO of Belu Water, Chancellor of the University of Westminster, author, podcaster, broadcaster, all-round badass, and your next Mayor of London.
Raised by her grandparents from Jamaica, this guest knows how to keep things airy. Being prepped for a life that can be tough led her to build her resilience highly. Inspired by the world of hip-hop, seeing self-made CEOs, it would seem her path would be into music industry, but that wasn't the direction the path of her life did flow. Hitting a place of rock bottom and bouncing back by seeing that you can't ever be broker than broke, to entrepreneurship, running businesses, and now running for London Mayor, so you remember where you can cast your vote. So now we'll tell how she became from her own perspectives and angle. Introducing co-CEO of Belu Water and Westminster Chancellor, Natalie Campbell.
I love that.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me. What a great introduction.
There you go. Your life in a poem.
I need that. I need
Every
that on
morning.
a t-shirt. The whole thing.
T-shirt.
Yeah.
I'm down with that.
That's a great idea. We've had ideas for Persian rugs, put them on Persian rugs.
Yeah.
Now t-shirt. Who knows?
Thank you.
So who is the kind of person that wakes up one day and goes, do you know what? I'm going to run for the Mayor of London in 2024.
Yes.
Well, we have that person here today. You're running for London Mayor. People can vote for you on the 2nd of May 2024.
Yeah.
And we're going to learn, what can someone learn from someone about like this, about being bold and stepping out there, stepping out of your comfort zone to do something bold and brave. And I think that's a big lesson people will learn from you. But also, we're going to have some great lessons on business here. You are an entrepreneur. We're going to learn lessons about leadership, about setting visions and how to communicate. You're having to communicate with the whole of London at the moment.
Yeah.
9 million? 8 million?
9 million.
9 million.
Yeah.
We hit the official 9, have we? Or is it
have.
almost? Wow. There we go. 9 million. Well, let's dive into it. Where does it all begin? We're going to tell your story.
We do indeed. To cover a few points here.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Yeah,
No,
points.
we have to have a whole section of the show
Mhm.
to share your career history
Okay.
Mm.
and your titles
Mhm.
and the boards you've sat on and many things you've done. It's very extensive. So we're going to do that first so people can get to know you.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So you're currently co-CEO of Belu Water, a company that puts people and the environment first.
And is that correct? You do 100% of profits go to
WaterAid.
WaterAid?
Yep.
Amazing.
That is
Love that.
amazing. Next up, you are also Chancellor of the University of Westminster.
Mm-hmm.
In 2020, awarded an MBE for services for social entrepreneurship and business.
Yeah.
You're also an advisory council member of PwC.
Yes.
So, and we're not finished, by the way. We're halfway through. That's what you're doing now. But you've been on so many boards and
Yeah.
and you've been a Royal Aid. You led on insight and innovation for the Royal Foundation,
Yeah.
which is run by, some people know them as William and Kate. Some people know them as the Prince and Princess of Wales.
Mm-hmm.
You were also a Royal Aid for Prince Harry and Meghan.
Mm-hmm.
You advised the current Mayor of London, I guess rival now.
There's no rivalry when you're trying to do good things.
Love that.
Love that.
So you advised him as a board member of the Mayor of London's London Economic Action Partnership,
Yep.
board member of the Big Lottery Fund, which is part of the National Lottery,
Mm-hmm.
and many more. We're not
Yeah.
going to do all of them, but I just want people to understand at the beginning
Yeah.
that when you're sharing your advice, you're speaking from great experience and you've done such a diverse range of things, which is really impressive.
Thank you.
So thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. You know, listening to you, I put in the work. And we live in a time where we don't necessarily see the work that goes into being successful or the work that goes into changing things for other people. And so the first few times people say, you know, these are the things you have done, I was like, oh, it's a bit much. And now I'm like, no, yeah, that's what it takes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I own it now.
Yes,
Yeah.
hours and hours and days and years of
Absolutely.
grinding and hard work
Yeah.
has gone into it. And it hasn't all been easy. There's been a lot of challenges and we're going to get to them. There's been a lot of successes. So let's go back to where it all begins.
As we mentioned, you're now independently running for the Mayor of London. And this streak of independence is a theme from your life, right? Throughout your life.
Ooh, yes.
So take us back to your early years of life and what allowed you to become so independent, being raised by your grandparents. How did that come about?
So I'd never thought about it like that, but yeah, you're right. The independent streak. So I was raised by my grandparents. I'm Jamaican. My paternal grandparents raised me predominantly, and I'd spend summers with my maternal grandmother. And when you're raised like that, especially in large families, and my paternal grandparents were also foster carers, and my grandmother was a childminder. So there were people all over the house all of the time. You need to learn how to keep yourself entertained and busy, because it's very different when I see my friends raising children now, where there's a lot of time just speaking to them. Yeah, there's lots of things to do for all of the adults in the house. So I had to figure out things to keep myself entertained. I'm also the eldest child for my dad. So I didn't have other children around that were my age. And I was the first grandchild.
Wow.
So that element of independence, because I spent my life with adults or lots of younger children, and generally, you know, you had to help out a bit. It crafted something in me that I've only just come to realize, which is an independent streak, an ability to be alone with my thoughts, to not need other people's counsel. And I'm also an introvert. So actually I can spend time with myself, doing things alone, coming up with whole visions, big picture thinking, without having to bounce off other people in a way that other entrepreneurs or other CEOs would need to. And it started at that very young age.
For anyone who might not know, what was the experience of growing up in a Jamaican family in London?
So I had a wonderful childhood, but it's also a challenging childhood in that Willesden in the 90s, there were lots of working class families, many of whom were around my grandparents' age. And I'm trying to actually think what age they might have been, but I'm guessing it was early 50s. You know, time is an interesting thing post-COVID, but it must have been early 50s or even late 40s maybe. There wasn't a lot of wealth. We didn't grow up in poverty by any means, but there wasn't a lot of wealth. Families back then made do with what they had. My gran made her own clothes. I wasn't on free school meals, but I remember, my gran sort of getting my child benefit and then working out what I was going to be taking to school that week for lunch. So money wasn't plentiful, and it wasn't that I was conscious of it, but when I meet people now that for some reason believe that I've had this spoon-fed, silver lining, I must be rich sort of upbringing, I'm like, no, not at all. And I guess it's also implied in the fact that I was raised by my grandparents. I didn't come from a 2.4 family. My parents had me really young. And so they weren't necessarily, they weren't there at bedtimes. I spent time with my dad when he was in certain relationships. I spent some time with my mum. And so I didn't have the general stability of always being in the same bed or the same space all of the time. And those things for me growing up, and even now, they're not issues. But what I connect it to is that people have made an assumption that my success now is because I've never had any struggles. But as a child growing up in a non-conventional way, it does come with its own challenges and issues. And as I got older, I have 6 brothers and I have a sister. The family dynamic has changed so much. And I see that there are other ways to be raised. And I'm like, oh, maybe I was a bit too resilient when I was younger. I maybe should have asked for more me time or more focus on me. But it hasn't done me too badly to date.
And were there any particular phrases, sayings that would be repeated about life or work?
There were, so not just phrases and sayings about work, but just about life. So I'd often hear sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt you. My maternal grandmother was very religious, and she would pray every morning for about an hour and every night before bed for about an hour for everyone, for those close to her, for the world, whatever was going on, every single night.
She would do it out loud? Would you
out
hear
loud.
her? Okay.
So I'd be in the bed. She'd bring me a cup of tea and some Jacob's crackers and butter, which I'd also have in the morning as well. I think my diet was Jacob's crackers and butter and sweet tea. And she'd get on her hands and knees at the end of the bed and just pray. And now, while she was praying, you could not move. So, and I generally was never asleep. So you just listen to this prayer going out.
Wow.
And I genuinely didn't really think about it until this podcast, but hearing that offering for people in the world so much at such a young age, I think has seeped into me. And when I see things that are wrong, my instinct isn't necessarily to pray, it's to do. And both of my grandmothers were doers. They were foster carers. They were childminders. They were active in their community. And they were also very strong. So you could not say a bad word to either of my grandmothers and not, hear something back. And I have that spirit too. And my granddad. My granddad only recently passed. He passed away last year, or the year before. Anyway, it's recent. And he was for me as a grandchild, a very calm, didn't say much sort of character. But when he did say something, it was usually very funny. It was usually very insightful. So his thing was you can't live in more than one room of your house at any one time. And he used to always say that to me when I was talking about business or building an empire. He was like, but to what end? You can have a huge house, but you can only be in any one room at any one time. So it doesn't matter the size of your house as long as you have a room that you can be in, that you're comfortable in. And I get a lot of my later life work ethic from him. He started his own car garage when I was actually quite young. And it was because he was in these different jobs. He was a mechanical engineer. And after a while, he's like, I just don't like working for other people. I don't like people telling me what to do. And he's like, I'm just going to go out on my own. And he was actually really successful. And so seeing all of that from my grandparents, along with the independent element of how I grew up. And then once both of my grandmother that died when I was 13, primarily when I went home, it was my granddad there. There is a thing that I experienced growing up in London at that age that I know young people don't have now. That safety, that security, that village. Some might, but I know a large proportion don't. And we can bring that back in different ways, but we can bring that back.
Love it.
And what would you say your favourite Jamaican dish is?
So I don't really eat meat anymore. But if I'm treating myself, be stew beef, rice and peas, macaroni cheese, coleslaw, must have plantain, gravy all over with extra gravy on the side. And depending on if there's space, a festival or a dumpling. And then crumble with custard. Has to be school crumble, like properly made with your hands, like that. Any day of the week.
You'd think by your answer that we told you we were going to ask that. We didn't.
No, that
all just came off the top of your head like that.
It's my favourite
specific.
Favourite. But I don't really eat meat, so I don't have it that often.
So we fast forward a little bit now. You're around 15 years old, listening to maybe a bit of Bad Boy Entertainment, some Destiny's Child, the musics of the time. Surely you're not thinking about work at this point in your life.
Absolutely. I was thinking about work. I don't think there's ever been a day that I've woken up that I haven't thought about work. I decided at 15 that I wanted to be a CEO. And it was because of the hip hop movement at the time. I saw the hip hop CEOs, whether it was So Def or Bad Boy or others, and I was like, that. I want to be that. I want to do something that I love. I want to entertain people. I loved the creativity of it as well. There was something about the visual and the aesthetic that goes beyond entertainment to really reaching into someone's soul. I was like, I want that.
The fur jackets.
Totally. The shiny suits. Here for it.
Yeah.
And it really was a movement that inspired. And for anyone watching this now that didn't grow up in that time, they don't understand that that was the first time that we were seeing that. I remember I used to get tapes sent over from my cousins in the US because we didn't have access to all of the music videos that they had access to. MTV didn't really play hip hop and R&B, and then MTV Base launched a lot later where you could sort of see it more actively. The internet was not a thing. It's really important for me to say this. There were no phones in your hand. The internet was not a thing. If you wanted to see a music video, you put a tape in a tape machine and you watched it, and if that tape broke, then that was it. You had to wait for your next shipment from the US to see these music videos.
So what year are we talking now about?
So this would have been 95. I need to work out how old I am. But yeah, it's the 90s.
90s. And did you have a favourite music video?
Oh,
the time?
probably. So my favourite music video is Real Love by Mary J. Blige.
Okay.
And it's very much a music video of the moment in that the backdrop is gritty New York. She's wearing the oversized baseball jersey. She's got the cap on. She's got the blonde hair. I think there's probably a red lip in there too. There's no sexual overt, like, it's dancing, it's singing, and it's talking about real love. Like, to me, that is the good stuff. That is my favorite music video.
Yeah, love that era. Brings back many memories.
It's so good, right?
And filming music videos as well. That was my thing too. Back when I had cable. Yeah. And I think I had MTV, The Box, and what's the other one? Not VHS.
VH1.
VH1.
That had a little section sometimes
Yeah,
that
you
would
could get your little
like
section
play
of
some
it.
black people.
Yeah.
It was like, oh,
And that
we're
was
on
me
TV for
on the
once.
dive to and the record button. My mum always used to be like, "What are you doing?" I thought it's music videos, Mum.
Yeah.
From school, you're then accepted into Lancaster University. It's a very northern city in the
Very
UK for anyone who's not in the UK and doesn't know our geography. And you go through quite a challenging period as you move to this university. It's quite an isolating time for you in your life. What was happening then, and how did you navigate this?
So I want to go back slightly. After school, I took a gap year out. And I worked about 1 million different jobs during that gap year, from Thames Water sewage plant to a karate studio in Camden. And I learned a lot in that year about what sorts of jobs I wanted to do and what sorts of jobs I would never ever do, but also about bosses and leadership. And what I realized in that, I also went traveling around the world. So I went traveling around the world for 6 weeks, not backpacker style. I went in what I consider to be the most luxury I could afford.
Bougie style.
Basically bougie. It's always been with me. And what I learned in that year set me up for how I lead now.
Interesting.
But it also taught me that I would not want to spend too much of my life being an employee. And I really had to lean into this idea of being the CEO and being the boss. So when I got to Lancaster, on day one of getting to Lancaster, I was like, right, how do I become this CEO? How do I create something that is going to give me the life that I want, that is going to get me to this highest value of freedom? And I didn't have the language at the time to be like, my highest value is freedom. But I knew it instinctively that that's the goal that I was chasing. And so got to Lancaster, and it was a little bit racist. I was one of like 3 black people probably on campus. There were maybe a few more, but it wasn't that much more. And I would be out and, you'd hear the N-word and you'd be like, Coming from London, it's quite a slap in the face where actually, to be honest, race and racism wasn't something that was for me, particularly prevalent because I was in London. It was multicultural. So getting to Lancaster, that was intense. And for a while I wanted to leave, but I was really focused on this idea of being a CEO. And I chose Lancaster because the precocious part of me wanted to be a big fish in a small pond. And that is why I chose Lancaster. And so I stuck it out, but I stuck it out because I lent into work. And I created a student newsletter for entrepreneurs called ACE. And I was interviewing entrepreneurs, and that would be a way of getting out of Lancaster because I'd just jump on a train and just go and interview some people. And then I started student club nights, focusing on R&B because no one was playing R&B and I was in desperate need. And then I did a thing called Lancaster Idol. Pop Idol was big on TV at the time, so we did a local talent show. And all of these things got me closer to this dream, to this idea. But it also allowed me, the reason I went into the magazine and the club nights and Lancaster Idol was because it was music and it was creative. That's where my heart was at the time. What changed was that I started to read more business books. And I read a book called Anyone Can Do It by Bobby and Saha Hashimi. And it was their journey of opening the Coffee Republic coffee chain. Again, for context, because I'm old, this was before anyone was into coffee. This was before you could get really great coffee on the go. Starbucks wasn't really a thing. And so I thought, right, I'm going to bring coffee to Lancaster. The only coffee place in Lancaster at the time was a Costa Coffee, and that was a franchise in a hairdresser's. That idea didn't work because I came back after a break, like an Easter break, and I saw that a Cafe Nero had opened. So I thought, right, you can't have multiple coffee places in a small town centre. Well, yeah, that's rubbish because now we have coffee shop next to coffee shop next to coffee shop. But back then I was like, it will never work. So I went to my next love, which was retail. I'd worked for a clothing store, a brand called Morgan, from the age of 16. And by the time I got to university, I pretty much was a Morgan girl. If you cut me, I bled Morgan. There was something about those brands, Kukai, French Connection, Topshop, Miss Selfridge, Jane Norman, that if you'd worked in one of them or you bought your clothes from one of them, it became an identity. In the same way that on social media, people in different communities sort of form an identity. It was the clothing stores that you went to. So I was a Morgan girl. So I decided that I would try and open a Morgan franchise. And
as most people do when they like a store, let me franchise it.
And it was the perfect alignment of, I'm an entrepreneur, I want to be a CEO, what am I good at? I've read this book, the thing that they're talking about in this book, i.e. coffee, I can't do. So let me do this other thing that I love. All of it coming together at the right time. And because I had been running a business, CC UK, and I had a business bank manager, it wasn't actually that difficult. And now when I hear people talking about the challenges of starting a business, it frustrates me because back then when I was 20 at university with just a small track record, it was much easier for me to raise the amount of money that I needed, get a lease on a shop, get a landlord to agree to giving me, a long-term lease. All of these things were really easy. And when I tell my story, sometimes I talk about them as the 3 S's. So what are the 3 S's that you need that mean no matter what you're trying to do, once you get them, it's impossible to stop the ship from sailing. And it was really easy for me to get those 3 S's. And I went from having the idea to opening the store in 6 months. And I opened the store a week or so before my 21st birthday. I really struggle with 21st. I don't know why. Just as I was going into my final year of university. And it wasn't that hard. And to me, it was really normal. And I look back now and I'm like, was it normal? But to me, it felt normal.
It's not normal, but yes.
Yeah.
Felt normal to you.
Yeah,
so you started
totally.
your 21 starting
21.
this franchise?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what happens? This is your baptism of fire of entrepreneurialism.
It is. So everything was going beautifully well. I was, a big fish in a small pond, finishing my final year of university. I was also doing entrepreneurship modules at the time. I submitted my business plan as my dissertation. So I was making everything work for me.
And you were sort of becoming known as this retail entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Has that started yet?
Girl about town. Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Small. I mean, it was still Lancaster.
Yeah.
But
But if people said, tell me about Natalie Campbell, they'd say, business person, entrepreneur.
exactly.
She wants to be a CEO. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I was wrapping up my final year, thinking about what next. And I decided to move back to London, and I got a job working for the government's enterprise promotion body, which was called Make Your Mark at the time. And this was 2006. So it was a Labour government that was trying to create this idea of the British dream. How do we have the equivalent of the American dream by having the British dream? Let's put a big focus on entrepreneurship. So I interviewed for this role to be a higher education campaign manager. And it was my job to go into universities to basically preach the virtues of becoming a graduate entrepreneur, which was perfect because that's what I've been doing. And so I took that job, still had the store in Lancaster, was sort of getting through the process of finishing up university and graduating and moving back. And I thought, right, I'm going to do this and continue to build out more retail stores in the Northwest. That was the vision. That was the focus. What happened about 6 or 7 months later was that I was on the tube going home. I opened the Evening Standard and I saw 700 jobs go as Morgan declares bankruptcy.
Oh no. This is the company you owned a franchise from.
Exactly.
And they've gone bankrupt.
Now, if a company that you are working with goes bankrupt and you only hear about it or read about it in the paper and you didn't know anything about it beforehand, there's pretty much nothing you can do.
No, it's out there.
But there's no one you can speak to because once it goes into administration, everyone gets sacked. So
and the administrators take over.
And then you're just one of hundreds of people that are owed money or in this chain. So I didn't know what to do. Even though I had built this business and lots of people had helped me make it happen, in that instance, there was no one that could help me figure out what to do next. Not even the people that I was working with on the enterprise campaign, because no one had considered it as part of a modular university, I guess. So I decided to take matters into my own hands, to be the entrepreneur, to be the CEO, and go back to Lancaster for a week, took a week off work, and I rebranded the store. And I called it DM, Carpe Diem, seize the day. And it didn't work. And I learned a massive lesson in that cash flow is queen because I used all of my working capital to buy new stock. I needed to change the colours. The shop fit was really expensive. The shop fit was about £60,000. So I had to get rid of all of these emblems of Morgan. And Morgan was a very distinct shop fit. There was lots of red, lots of acrylic. Gondolas were a certain style. There were lots of things I had to do to change it and then buy new clothes, whilst also having stock that I hadn't sold sort of sitting in the stockroom and I couldn't do anything with it. This was before e-commerce was really a thing. I tried to put some bits on eBay. That didn't really work because people weren't buying clothes from eBay. So I conceded defeat and I ultimately had to close the shop down. And because another thing that you don't necessarily know, because I took out personal guarantees for lots of the loans and debt, I then had to pay off about £50,000 worth of debt. Whilst on a graduate salary of then, I think it was £21,000.
Oh dear.
Wow. So for anyone who may ever get into a scenario like that, how did you keep a positive mindset?
Yeah.
Seeing this, going through all of these challenges and seeing this mountain of money that you now owe?
I'm not going to lie, I got into bed for like 3 days and cried. No, maybe it was a day. Probably a day. And then I was like, right, woman up, get it together. And the reality is that even if someone had told me what I should be doing, it's personal. It cuts deep. And because I'd built up this profile, even in Lancaster, of being this entrepreneur, it felt like a public failure. Because people didn't understand that it wasn't my shop that had gone into administration.
They just think, look at Natalie, she's not doing very well. Chat about entrepreneurship.
Exactly.
She doesn't know what she's talking about. Look at that. That's really painful to hear, right?
It's painful. And I was also in this job where I was talking about being a
But
graduate
you had to
entrepreneur.
still go
Yeah.
and talk to people about it and say how good it is.
I was really honest. So I think one of the things that got me through was because I had a job where I was talking about entrepreneurship. I was on stages at universities talking about what was happening in real time.
Wow, that's brave.
Honesty is the best way
Yeah.
to do anything, right? Because had I have tried to even begin to lie, people would have been like, "So, do you still have a shop?" And and then you have to So I was telling the story in real time, and it was my therapy. And so I'd get on these stages and almost do a bit of a comedy sketch about how bad it was going, but why it was still a good thing to do.
Brilliant. Yeah.
So all of that was happening. I learned loads of lessons. I was lucky that I did have a job, so I could start paying off the debt. But it meant that I was like, right, now I need to hustle because I've got this money to pay off.
Yeah.
And so I started doing more of what we now consider to be the 5 to 9, the side hustle. I started consulting. I did so many things that now I can't even remember. But it was about me trying to pay this debt off, but also figure out what it was that I could do to get back to being that CEO and that entrepreneur.
So, I mean, it's fascinating because this must be 2007 when
Yep.
this is happening, right? So between 2007 and 2020, right, there's a 13 years in between there. You go from being bankrupt and having all this.
No, so I never declared bankruptcy.
Oh, sorry.
So I took on the debt. So it was very important to me to take on the debt.
Right.
So the one bit of advice people did give me was you can declare yourself bankrupt because you're young and after a while it leaves your record or something like that. And I was like, no, because there's going to be a day when I either want to be a lawyer, an MP or something that means that I cannot have been declared bankrupt.
What about running for London Mayor? Can you have been declared bankrupt? for that?
So I could not run for mayor had I have declared myself bankrupt.
Wow. Amazing. You couldn't do what you're doing
No.
now.
And something in me knew that it was not the thing to do because of the thing I possibly wanted to do
Yes.
that I didn't quite know yet, but obviously I must have.
Wow, love
So
that.
I paid off the debt.
Good. Oh, I'm glad I got that wrong, so we could discover that. Excellent. So you would go from having a company that's you've owned a franchise of a company that's gone into administration, to be more specific. You've got debt, and then in the next 13 years, you'd go to advising government, advising the royals, running businesses. How did you turn things around?
Sheer grit, determination, hustle, being very good at what I do. And I'm not humble about that anymore. Like, I am hot. Lots of people think that entrepreneurs can have ideas and they can't execute, or they're not completed finishers. I'm finishing it. If I start it, I'm finishing it. And I'm finishing it well. It won't be perfect, but it'll be finished and it'll be finished well. And what I learned in that hustle stage was that there are other roles out there that I didn't know about. And joining boards was one of those roles that I didn't know anything about when I was 15, even when I was at university at 20. And my first board was for the British Youth Council. They only accepted young trustees. So you had to be under the age of either 24 or 25 to join the board. And it's still the same now. And I joined as their vice chair of campaigns and communications. And it opened up a world to me of leadership that's strategic and visionary and about influence and convening without being in the day-to-day doing.
How did you find out about it? And did you have to think, did you have the thought like, oh, I want to be on boards, or did it just pop up? Or
the universe brings you stuff, right? And I think I was probably looking for a side hustle job to pay me some more money. And I saw the advert for the British Youth Council. And I thought, what's this trustee thing? This sounds interesting. And it would have said for vice chair campaigns and communications. And that is my thing, campaigns and communications. And so I probably applied based on the title, not necessarily knowing what the gig was. And then I had to learn what it was. And then the big baptism of fire was that to get through the process, I had to pitch myself at their AGM. And I didn't know what any of this meant, but I got, it would have been a letter, probably not an email, saying you've been either shortlisted or we'd like to consider you to be our next vice chair campaigns and communications. Come to Keele University, I think it was, for an interview. I thought, oh, how hard can that be? Interview, fine. And I got there. I was like, this is a lot for an interview. And walked through these auditorium doors, and there was a university theatre, a large one, full of people. And they're like, I'll sit at the front. You'll be up next to give your AGM speech as to why you should be the next vice chair of campaigns and communications. And I was like,
Oh, gosh.
I obviously missed something somewhere in the small print that said this is what I need to do.
But here I am.
And someone went before me. So I was like, okay, so you say something for about 5 minutes. It's a pitch about why you... Right. So I went up, and I remember I said... something along the lines of, my name is Natalie Campbell and I'm a capitalist. And there was something that I must have realised in that time, that environment was not an environment that had an entrepreneur or a CEO in it before.
Mm.
And what I wanted them to know about me was that I was a very different offer to the others that were in the room that had come up through the student union movement. And so I got that it was a bit sort of National Union of Student-y, academia, business is bad, money's bad. And I wanted them to know that my approach and my way of doing things was about being entrepreneurial. It was about being a CEO. It was about leveraging money and resources to do good things. And I don't remember anything else that I said after that. But I got the role, and I was always known around the table as being more of a capitalist and more of a businesswoman in the way that I thought and did things than anything else.
So if I'm listening to this, I'm like, yeah, I want to get on boards, and I might be a CEO of a big company, or I might be starting off my career like you were. How do you do it? Do you Google it? Are there a database of board positions that are available? What advice?
Yeah. So the quickest way, I would say, decide what skills you're bringing, and then what you're passionate about. And then from there, now there are loads of places that you can go to look. So the Guardian jobs have a section just for you to look up charity trustees. The Sunday Times appointment has a listing of trustees. Generally, if it's in the Sunday Times, they want more of an advanced level of trustee or board member. But the Guardian is a good start. If there are charities that you want to join as a trustee, contact the chair and just say, this is who I am, this is my CV, I'd love to meet you. Because it might be that there isn't a role right now, but every board term has a specific tenure. It could be 3 years, it could be 4 years, and sometimes you'll get to do 2, sometimes you'll get to do 3. But people leave all of the time. So if you meet a chair and that chair knows there's an opportunity in 3 years, you've got 3 years to get yourself ready for that role if that's what you want. And I have used that tactic to get board roles on multiple occasions. And on one specifically, I was rejected twice and I got it on my 3rd attempt.
Great. Well, it's definitely one lesson you learn in entrepreneurship, not to take a no
I don't really hear no. It just bounces. So there's a bit of reverb somewhere.
And eventually it'll convert into a yes.
Exactly.
And yeah, people interested. Did you get paid for these? Do they always get paid? If it's a charity, do you get paid? How does that work?
So if it's a charity, you don't get paid. Generally, you don't get paid. And that's why it's important to connect skill and passion. I was on the board of the foundation of Unlimited, which is the foundation for social entrepreneurs, for 10 years. And I did it for 10 years because I loved and still love everything about the organization. Yeah. And I could give so much of myself in who I was and what I wanted to do to that organization without having to work in the organization. So it's a really great trade-off for passion.
And what are you giving in terms of time? Usually, is there a rough?
Yeah, so
Ballpark.
the ad usually says, they sort of say a day or two a quarter. I mean, if you care, you lean in and you just do what needs to be done. The big thing that I need to say about everything that I say is I do not have children and I do not have a partner. So I have a lot more time than most people to do stuff. If you have a family, it is a lot harder because these meetings happen in the evening. If you have a full-time job, you'll need to have days off. You can use your volunteering days. It is a commitment. But for me, I knew that once I started doing it, it was a way for me to do more to influence and change rooms in a way that I wouldn't be able to if I was going in an executive position. But also lots of these boards back then didn't have people around the table that looked like me, but they were making decisions about people that looked like me. So the National Lottery Communities Fund is a great example of that. Mentioned it in the beginning, big lottery fund, £1 billion a year going into communities. But at the point that I joined, there were no young people around the table. There were no black women around the table. There were no working class people around the table. Some of my fellow board members might message me and say I'm working class, but I'm like, no. But when you read the strategy at that time, it was about getting funding to young people. It was about getting funding into underrepresented communities. It was about getting funding into different socioeconomic groups. How do you do that when the people around the table have no connection or understanding of what it's like to come from those communities? And so then I started joining boards where I felt they needed to be disrupted and they needed something different. And I would say that's why the passion is really important, because when you join a board with that hat on, you don't start thinking about time. You just start thinking about how much change can I deliver.
I see. Brilliant. And we should just cover briefly, but if it's not a charity and you're going on the board?
So if it's not a charity and you're joining the board, which would mean it's either a private company, might be a startup, or it is a public body, then generally they are paid. Not always, but generally they are paid, and that varies. But mostly in the ads it will say. Good example is if you join a health trust, those payments are about £13,000 to £15,000 a year. If you are joining something that's in the arts space, some of those pay that slightly less. It's about £7,000, but there's a set standard of payments for these roles.
Brilliant. And I should just say, actually, if people were interested in this area, we had Tess Alps, who's non-executive director at Channel 4 on the show. She talked a lot about boards and being on the board, and they get $20,000 a year to be on Channel 4. So
slightly more.
Yeah, fits.
So you're now the co-CEO of Belu Water, of which we spoke about earlier. Give us an overview on how you got this position and why you wanted this position.
So as with everything, I saw it advertised and I applied.
Where was it this time?
So this one was actually a recruitment company called Starfish Search. And I was on their website because I was doing something else. I was actually trying to place an ad for a role. And as I was scrolling through just to see, what sort of roles they had, I saw this role and I was like, oh. And it's a great example. I always say the universe doesn't make any mistakes. Everything that happens to me, for me, around me is meant to happen. And the role so I was placing this role, and there would have been no other reason for me to be looking at this site. But in placing this role, which then didn't actually even turn into a role, I then found sort of the next stage of my life and a very big part of my life. And apply is a piece of advice I give to so many people. So many people do not apply for things through fear of, well, I won't get through or they won't accept me. Even if I have no skills in relation to the thing that's being asked, if I want to be around that table or be in that space, I will just apply anyway. And then you communicate why you are applying and what you think you'll bring. In the case of Belu, I did tick all of the boxes. And I'd known the founder, Reed Paget, way back when he started the brand. He wasn't still running the company. It was then it had 10 years of tenure with another CEO, but it was a brand that I knew, a brand that we've all seen out and about in hospitality, and I knew that both based on my very good company experience, I didn't want to go back into consulting, and I really enjoyed products. It brought me back to being a retail girl. And so I applied and got the job at Belu, and I joined on the 2nd of March 2020, and we went into lockdown 3 weeks later.
Oh, yes.
What a great start.
What an absolutely great start.
Baptism of fire.
Part 2.
Part 2. The difference this time was that I had done so many things throughout my career that I felt so ready for what was to come.
I see.
And because I'd been an apprentice, I'm still an apprentice. I'd apprenticed myself to be able to deal with crisis. I'd apprenticed myself to know what to do when, like that, you open the newspaper and you see 700 jobs go. You watch the Prime Minister on television whilst you're in a pub say pubs and bars must close at 10 p.m. tonight. Knowing that the business that you're now running serves pubs, bars, workplaces, all of these places that are going to close. And so I did what I knew how to do and focused on the team, focused on what we knew, so the money.
And this is, I just say, this is great advice for any crisis, essentially.
Yeah.
Any crisis that's going to cause a big change.
Crisis.
Yeah,
Focus
please
on
carry
the
on.
people. So who's around you? Who does it impact? Who does it affect? The money. What's coming in? What's going out? If, going back to my cash flows clean from earlier, if money is a huge issue for a founder or a CEO, it can become all-consuming. So really understanding the truth of revenue, what you've got in the bank, what you're owed, what debt you might have that might need to be recalled, like understanding that really quickly and getting across that. And generally that comes back to people, because you're either going to have to call the bank, you're going to have to call investors, the list goes on. Getting across that means you get to a place of peace of mind. When you operate from fear, it's the fastest way to kill anything good, because you start making bad decisions. And you can't take people with you because you're in fear mode.
Who wants to follow someone who's
scared? Yeah.
And so at no point was there any fear. At no point was there crisis communications or feelings across the team. It was like, one day at a time. Let's go with what we know. Let's communicate with the board. As a team, how are we all? Especially in the middle of COVID, where it was about health and people were dying. How are we all? How's everyone adjusting to homeschooling? For me, my team checking in to make sure I was okay, because I was alone. Alone, whilst it was also sunny, without a garden, in a top floor flat in Kensal Rise. So the check-ins, with everyone was key. And then we had to build trust digitally. So I was creating a culture and a way of working, which was about, let's just take every day as it comes, but also having to build trust with the team so that they knew that what I said I was going to do, what I said was going to be the next action, was really going to be the next action. Because I'm sure most of them thought, oh gosh, is she going to fire everybody? Because that's what a lot of businesses did.
Yeah.
And I didn't. So I always say, and now I really feel it, like in my DNA of how I show up, is if you focus on the people around you, and you can replace money for resource, whatever it is, like what's the next thing that's most important to this situation? So if it's not a business, but you're a creative and you're working with material, like how much material do you have? Like what's the thing? What's the energy source of the thing you're trying to do? Like understand that. If you get those two bits right, you will be fine. And if we fast forward to now, Belu's thriving. We're a team of 25 now. Around COVID, it was 6.
Wow.
Revenue dropped to 2 million. I took over Belu at 6 million. It dropped to 2 million. We'll be announcing our latest figures shortly in the amount that we're giving to WaterAid, but it's a lot more than 2 million and it's more than 6 million.
Oh,
so we've managed to also grow.
Amazing.
And it's, you know, those moments of challenge, especially then for me and the team around me, meant that we bonded in a way that may have taken a year or 2 years. So from a work perspective, there was a lot that I got out of my own journey as a leader, even though it was a really challenging time for us as a business, and it was challenging for so many people on so many levels just because people around you were dying. But I learned a lot.
And so we have a lot of people who listen and watch this show who are CEOs, very senior, big organizations, you know, hundreds of millions, tens of millions, but also people who are just senior in roles in organizations, entrepreneurs, people who'd like to start a business one day, and they want to know how great businesses are run. So we've got some questions about how you've run Belu Water.
Okay. One of them is, Belu Water is known for its commitment to sustainability in the environment. How do you ensure the correct implementation of strategies that can do this at scale?
Yeah. So the first thing I say, as a CEO, it has to be your responsibility. 2 things, more than 2 things, but 2 things that I take as my responsibility: people, and then how Belu lives its purpose. Belu's purpose is to change the way the world sees water. Nothing goes out the door, no partnership is created without me understanding and auditing, and Charlotte, my co-CEO, what that activity does, looks like, feels like, because we need to know that it is really furthering our purpose. A really good example of this is offsetting. Lots of companies that are starting now, especially drinks companies, are like, oh, we're carbon neutral, and they're paying money to offset their carbon emissions. Offsetting is a massive Wild West of poorly created carbon credits. Now, if you're a CEO that has not invested the time to understand and build their own sustainability literacy, you don't know that. You're just taking some expert's word for it. Charlotte and I were like, no. I need to understand the project. I need to then read around the subject to understand what's going on in that country, in that territory. Were communities displaced for this project? How much money is getting to there? Like, we go in. Like, we're like auditors of everything. And if those questions can't be answered, we're not doing it. And it got to a place on carbon credits and offsets. We were like, this system is broken. We're going to not do it. And for our brand, it was a big part of the brand promise. We're carbon neutrals in all of our products. And we were just like, nope.
So you decided not to be carbon neutral anymore?
Yeah.
Wow.
Before others decided it was the right thing to do. Because we could just see this isn't adding up. So we stopped being carbon neutral, even though consumers were like, this is the new thing. Now consumers, I think, know better. But at the time, it was a big gamble.
Wow. Just shows that, the power of taking those risks when you've done the research and you know.
You have to do the work. If it sounds too good to be true, it absolutely is.
Yeah. So engaging stakeholders in a meaningful way is crucial to any business. How do you approach stakeholder engagement?
Stakeholder engagement, I'd say, is probably one of the most important things that you can do as a business. And I include the internal team in that. Honesty, probably the first bit of it. So at Belu, everything we do is open source. We produce an impact report each year, which has all of the data from our business, and we organize it in our purpose P&L. So against our sustainable development goals, we share how much money we made, how much profit we've made, therefore how much is going to WaterAid, how much we've spent on investments, as in investments in impact partnerships. So instead of offsetting, we spend the same amount on climate activities around resilience and water stewardship. how much we've invested in learning and development, how much we've invested in packaging innovation, so people can see all of this data in real time. We can then share that with all of our customers. So when our customers are saying, we've chosen Belu because they are the best environmentally and socially, they really know that that is true. As a small business, we don't need to audit our accounts, but we do that anyway. Again, so when people say, is this your profit? Is this your net profit? We can say, yeah, externally audited, it's there. We verify a lot of our work. We work with really innovative partners to do that. Provenance.org is a great one. Lots of businesses say stuff and they don't have any data to back it up. By using provenance, when you have a provenance mark, you can click on the mark, and if a company's saying this is 100% recycled, or this is UK made, or this is animal cruelty free, you can click on that claim and see their evidence to prove that it is that thing.
I see. So if you're working with provenance, then that's a good thing. That's likelihood that you're going to be doing what you're saying you're doing, and if you're not, then it's debatable potentially.
I would say it's not that a company wouldn't be doing it. It's just, as a consumer, you have to work harder to find out how they are doing it.
Yeah.
And so they should be communicating it somewhere on their website. And if they're not communicating it anywhere, then I would question whether or not they are doing it. But it's about the communication and making it easy for consumers to understand what all of these claims mean.
Fascinating. Okay, so that's some great lessons on business and social entrepreneurship from Belu. Now we get to more present day. What is the day that you woke up and decided, do you know what? I'm going to run for London Mayor.
Yeah, I mean, can I swear?
We'll beep it out, so you can do.
There were many mornings where I woke up and I said, what the actual and it was close to despair. But just waking up and going, what is going on in the world? How have we got to a place where it's okay to treat people like this? And for me, national politics is broken.
Why'd you say that?
Lots of people don't know what an MP's job is. So in simple terms, an MP's job is to be part of the legislative body for the UK. An MP doesn't have any financial levers to change anything. They have no financial powers, and they don't hold any ability to start things or end things. As for you as an individual, all they can do is write a letter, because if an MP writes to you, if an MP has written on your behalf about something, the person they've written to is bound to respond. They have to respond. So a really important influencing tool, but not a lever to actually deliver change. So if you then have a group of MPs that want to become a minister or a secretary of state, those MPs consider the things that they will champion or back based on a career pathway. If I back this thing, does it make me more popular in my party? Does it give me a platform to then get to this next role? So when you have a system that is self-interested, and I'm not saying all MPs are, I genuinely believe that most people get into it because they want to make a difference. It's the system of how you succeed that creates the self-interested element. Where we've got to, I feel, is a national politics that isn't about actually making people's lives better. It's about serving individual desires for power and success, which means we have to look at what the other ways, what the other roles in politics might be that actually have levers to do things. And interestingly, councillors, which are, I guess, a lesser known role to the general public in terms of politics, have far more levers. A councillor can fix your pothole because your councillor looks at the budget 4 roads. A councillor in the City of London Corporation, then slightly different structure, can help get a school to a place where it is performing really well. The Mayor of London has the budget for all of London, and that's a minimum of £17 billion a year. So every home that's being built, according to, there's a strategy called the London Plan, all of the Met Policing budget, the fire brigade, all of these things are led by the mayor and the GLA, which is the Greater London Authority. All of the money comes to the mayor. The mayor sets the strategy, others then deliver. So when you look at a lever for actually delivering change, people say the mayor doesn't have any power. I think it depends on how the mayor shows up. And if people are saying the mayor doesn't have any power, I'm saying that's because we currently have a mayor that's showing up in that way. No rivalry, all love and respect here. I'm just saying
that's your thoughts.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That is not true when you have £17 billion a year, and when you design the strategy, and when you dictate ultimately what London should look and feel like over a tenure. So for someone like me, a CEO, an entrepreneur that's about doing things, national government and politics doesn't work, because you don't actually get to do anything, because you have to spend the whole time thinking about what's in it for me.
Understood. Okay. So this is what drove you to go, okay, let me put my hat in the ring.
So the annoyance at the world, and then thinking what political role could get me there. There's only so much you can do in business if you're not a billionaire. There's only so much you can do in the media, and these are hats that I've worn. There's only so much you can do through education. Politics is where you change systems at scale.
I see.
And you can change them quickly.
So this comes back to your root causes approach.
Exactly.
I see. So by getting to Mayor of London, you can really start to deal with the root causes of the issues in the capital.
Significantly. So much of how we live is determined by politicians.
So how does it work? You say, okay, I'm going to go for London Mayor.
Yeah.
Do you call up the Mayor's office and say, I'm running, put me in? How does it work?
Yeah, I'd love to know how
Sort
this
of.
happens.
So no, you can just say you're running, which
Oh.
lots of people do.
I
They
see.
just wake up and say, I'm running. You need someone to cover that you're running so other people know you're running.
I.e. like cover the news, like get
Yeah.
the news out there. Yeah.
So that's the base level. So in the COVID year, lots of people ran for Mayor of London. To actually get on the ballot, you need 330 signatures. These signatures have to be equally spread across all of the boroughs in London and the City of London Corporation. So that's 10 signatures from every borough in London and the City of London Corporation. The City of London Corporation is not a borough, so it's a separate entity. So you need that, and then you need to pay. So it's £10,000 to get on the ballot. So 2 really significant milestones. The reasons I said it was almost similar to calling up the mayor's office is that the GLA run the process for what I've just described.
I see.
So they have to sign off your paperwork to say that you've got the right signatures with the right details on. And it's not just signatures. And none of this is digital, by the way. So
you have
people
to
have to just
Go to
write
someone
down
with a form.
their name and sign it, and give me their electoral roll number, which they will not have until the 1st of March.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So this is not something that's been completed yet?
No.
I see.
So we will not know officially who is actually on the ballot until early April.
Interesting.
Right.
And so how many signatures do you have at the moment?
So that's a great question. Well, none.
Because you
No one knows their
I
electoral roll
see.
number.
So until that date, you can't even get one signature.
No.
I see. And
So I
these
get
can be
to
any people?
pledge. Any Londoner that is eligible to vote,
I see.
which is a lot of Londoners.
When you say Londoner, do they have to have a home address in London
Yeah.
or? Okay.
Yeah. So you have to be you have to live in Greater London and be registered to vote. That's the two key things.
I see. Understood. Okay. And then 10 grand. Who do you go online on Barclays and transfer it to the government? Or
Yeah.
That's how it works. They give you a sort code and account number and say, that's so interesting.
Yeah. So that bit of the process, the financial transaction, is relatively simple. But there are so many other hurdles that are quite old school in the way they're done, analog, in person, when so much of our lives are digital, right? It's really odd to me that this part of our democracy is paper-based.
I see. I just want to clarify for people, though, is it... So by that date, which is the 1st of April, did you say? 1st of March?
For the signatures?
The signatures, yeah.
So yes. So no, you will not have your electoral roll number until the 1st of March.
Yeah.
From the 1st of March, you have a new electoral roll number and you can nominate candidates to be on the mayoral ballot.
I see.
But that candidate will have to see you in person for you to sign, write your name down, sign their form and put your number on said form.
Goodness me.
Oof.
So at this
Quite a
point,
process.
Yeah.
do you know who those 330 people are going to be?
I have a good inkling of who they're going to be.
I see.
There are some boroughs that are easier than others. Brent is a home borough. Lots of people in South London. There are some boroughs that I know I'm probably lighter on the ground.
Which boroughs are that? Because anyone listening...
Yeah, so
wanna do
Redbridge
this.
is one of them.
Redbridge, hit Natalie up if you want to sign.
Havering is another one.
Havering.
Hillingdon is another one. So the outer boroughs. I grew up in inner city London, Zone 2. And generally the places that I've worked and the people that I know, it's Zone 1, 2 and 3. So the outer boroughs is where I know less people that I could physically get to sign a form.
But I assume you're like, I'm going to get those 330 signatures, and
Absolutely.
That's just a box to tick, and you move on to the 1 point.
But it's a really important box to tick, and I don't want to demean it by calling it a box to tick.
That was my words.
But it is,
yeah.
and you know, in the boroughs where I don't know people, it means that I need to go there.
Yeah.
I need to have conversations and I need to understand what their challenges are and what they want. At the moment, I'm doing that through a survey. But there's nothing like being in an area to know what really could be fixed and what's within the scope of the mayor to fix and what's not within the scope of the mayor to fix.
And just at this point, as you mentioned the survey, how can people find that? It's on your website, which is?
teamcampbell.london, nice and easy. And then there's a link to take the What London Wants survey.
There we go. Okay. So, and yeah, just lastly on this piece, it says on your website that you need 1.5 million votes to win.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Everyone keeps saying, can I win? Yes. It's a vote. And the voting system's changed to first past the post. So the candidate with the most votes wins.
And what was it before?
It was a version of proportional representation where you voted for a candidate with a first choice vote and then a candidate with a second choice vote. So a preference. The candidates that got the two candidates that got the most first choice votes sort of go to the top of the tree. And then they count the second preference. So if you let's say I put Rihanna as my first choice and Beyonce as my second choice.
Tough decision.
Yeah. Once all of the votes were counted, they would then allocate, and another person did it the other way around. So another person put Beyonce first and Rihanna second. They would allocate all of the people that put Rihanna second, all of those votes, they would give them to Rihanna to then make up a total.
Okay.
So when you have lots of candidates, say you add Madonna in and you add Cher and you add Celine Dion.
Tina Turner.
Just
keep going.
You keep going. Once you add all of them in, you get to a place where someone will have the most votes based on both their first, who put them down as a first choice and who put them down as a second choice.
I see. Okay.
So it means you can win by people saying, I don't want to vote for you, but I'll put you as my second choice because I don't have another option.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whereas under first past the post, it's one choice. So you have to choose the person that you want to win
So when we all vote on the 2nd of May, it will just be one person.
for one person.
I see.
And that's the 1.5 million votes. When you then add that 58% of Londoners didn't vote,
58% of Londoners did not vote
Yeah.
for the last time.
of eligible Londoners. So last time round, there were 6.1 million eligible voters. 58% of them didn't vote.
It's quite a lot.
It's a lot. I only need half of the people that didn't vote last time to vote for me to win. So I don't need to touch any other candidate's vote. This is about bringing new voters in who have felt, rightly so, that politics doesn't speak to them, isn't creating any change in their communities, and frankly, probably is lying their way through 4 years. So I'm hoping that people, as opposed to voting for a lesser evil, get up and say, I'm voting for someone I really want to vote for. That's my hypothesis.
Okay.
So communicating a compelling vision is key in politics. How do you effectively communicate your vision to such a diverse amount of people in London?
So I'm taking a very different strategy to what traditional politicos will tell you to do. Generally in politics, you have 3 messages. This, at the moment, it seems to be 5. 5 missions, 5 priorities. But generally, it's always been 3. And you have one headline thing that you say over and over and over and over and over again. And you just say that thing over and over and over and over and over again. And when before social media existed, it was really easy to just say that thing over and over and over again because there are only a certain amount of newspapers and a certain amount of publications and a certain amount of broadcasters. And so therefore, even if you said it 100 times, people would only hear it twice or 3
I
times.
see. Whereas if you tweet that every day, bit boring.
And then people say, well,
You got
What
anything
else?
else?
Yeah, what
Come
else?
on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and because the 58% is broad, I have multiple messages on multiple platforms in different ways of communicating so that I'm hitting people across all senses and all of the things that we care about, because we all care about more than one thing. And on any given day, what you care about as your first, second, third changes. And the other thing that I'm trying to show here is that the mayor's job is much bigger than the 1 or 2 things that we hear about. The mayor's job is arts and culture. The mayor's job is skills. Post-16 education is the mayor's responsibility. The mayor's responsibility is climate resilience in London. The mayor's responsibility is making sure that we rebuild trust with the Met Police. The mayor's responsibility is making sure that we have police doing the right things in the right places. The mayor's responsibility is making sure that 16-year-old girls aren't strip searched at school. These things are the mayor's responsibility, but we don't seem to be talking about them as the mayor's responsibility. And so in sharing a broader message on all of these platforms, people go, oh, I haven't heard any other candidate talking about this thing. And I'm hoping they then go, so what does the person I'm possibly going to vote for, if it's not me, think about this? Versus it being a single issue. And the 2 candidates from the main parties want it to be a single issue race on ULEZ.
Oh, really? Amazing.
So if you get
isn't it?
everyone angry about ULEZ, no one's looking at all of the other stuff
I see.
that you're supposed to be fixing. Throw the dead cat out there. And then, we don't have to have a manifesto or policies or do anything on all of this other stuff, which actually makes people's lives better. So if you have a candidate that's like, I'm not actually talking about ULEZ, talking about all of this other stuff, and it's on all of these other platforms, and it's video, and it's written, and it's podcasts, and it's events, then when they're not doing that stuff, people go, oh, okay, maybe you don't care as much. Which might be true. Maybe they don't care as much.
That's fascinating. So that they're essentially distracting with ULEZ so that they don't really have to talk about too
There's
much
always
else.
a big topic, right? Stop the boats is a distraction from what's really going on. So they just throw stuff out. It's a fear-based tactic. Get people angry, get them fearful. When you're in fear, like I said before, you can't think about the other things. You can't think about the good things. You can't think about what's better. Because you're in that mode of... So populist politics, as we've seen around the world, is about... And then you become... It's about you as an individual, or maybe your family. Whereas good politics, good society is about how are we all doing? Is this what's my role in that? These people that say they're leading us, what are they doing? And you have a more rational, balanced view of where you live and your high street and what really matters and what really is a big issue. Now, I'm not saying ULEZ isn't an issue. It absolutely is an issue if you now can't afford to visit your elderly parent or you can't afford to get to your job. But that is a very separate issue to what they've turned it into, and to win a whole election on that single issue when kids are dying every day in the street. To me, I'm like, we need to get some perspective here.
For people out there listening to your story, how do you get motivated and overcome challenges day by day in hope that they can take some of the learnings from themselves?
I actually think we just can't take ourselves too seriously. I know I'm talking about really serious and important things, but I always bring it back to life is to be lived. And at no point will I ever take myself so seriously that I can't step back and smell the roses of, I have a privileged life. I'm successful. I have a career that I love. I have people around me that I love. I live where I want to live. I've reached my highest value of freedom, although I'm willing to give all of that up to be Mayor of London. And that is always the thing that I think we should come back to. Like, what's the goodness of life? And my word is fun. My word is joy. And for others, it might be slightly different. But when we sit in that, the challenges are quite easy because it's a blessing to be able to fix the challenges. It's a blessing to have a hard day's work because it's a hard day's work of a job you've chosen to do. Like running for mayor and self-funding it and having people criticize every single thing that I do and tell me on a daily basis, multiple times a day, that I will not win is not fun. It's basically waking up and running at a brick wall every day, multiple times a day, and then going, I'm just going to do it again. But I get to choose to do this, right? That is a privilege. I'm in a position where I get to choose to run to be Mayor of London, credibly. And I can fund it. And I can have policies that I really care about. And I can talk to people. Like, there's a joy and a gift in that no matter how hard and challenging it gets, the reality when you step back is, I get to do it.
Powerful. Managing a high-profile career and a personal life is a challenge that many listeners will face. How do you manage that balance, and what advice do you have to share?
Work out what personal life means to you. I will be really honest. My life is I have one life. There's no 50-50, there's no balance. I just do the next thing. I'm very good at putting in time to look after myself.
How do you do that?
So I work out, I run. I'm a 10K runner, not often. So when I'm at my best, I run 10Ks. When I'm managing, I run 5s. And when I'm not doing very well, I'm on a treadmill and I do some sprints. but I run. I move my body. That is really, really important, just to work out all of the stress and the kinks.
How do you deal with that thought when you have got loads to do and you're like, I kind of know I need to go and do a run, but that's going to take me an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever. How do you deal with that conversation in your head?
So this is the switch that I've made recently. So I can't always run now. And I also do yoga. My days of pounding my body in the gym are over, so I don't do anything like HIIT anymore, but I do like a spin class and I do like to lift weights. But if I can't do any of that, then some other form of self-care. So I have an infrared sauna, I have a massage, I do compression boot therapy, I've tried oxygen therapy. And if I can't do any of those things, I will find time in my week to just have a lunch or a brunch or a dinner alone with myself. I managed to get back to going to the cinema. So one of the great things about running for Mayor of London is arts and culture is part of the brief. So I've been going to galleries and doing things that I would want to do, but hadn't found the time to do because it wasn't at the top of the list. Whereas now, exploring London is back on the top of the list. So that is a really great thing. When I do those things, I walk more. So even on the escalators, I don't stand on them generally now. I walk, even in heels, I will walk up the escalator.
On the left-hand side, everybody.
At pace, with focus. This is when my Londoner comes out.
That's it. Nothing noise a Londoner more than someone standing on the left.
Oh, that's when I realised like I'd become a Londoner by proxy because I don't live in London. Remember one day I was walking down the thing and someone was on the left and I just raged.
Excuse me.
Like, oh man. But that is
tap
it.
on the shoulder. Excuse me.
Get it right.
Firm.
Yeah. With walk with purpose. So I find time to do those things and hanging out with friends. So it's hard when I spent so much time with people as an introvert to then have energy to be with friends. But I try and do that as well.
What advice would you give to aspiring leaders who would like to leave their own mark on this world in a meaningful and significant way?
That is a big question. Because it's so personal, right? I would say it's why. Why are you doing it? And in a social media influencer, hot right now, celeb world, it's very easy for your why to be caught up in because it's hot right now. But if you bring it back to when you are no longer here, this is the thing that people see that tells them everything they need to know about who you are and who you were and what you did. I think people would choose very different things. I definitely think some of these artists would be making very different songs if they were like, this is the song that's going to outlive you for the rest of your life. I know we're bringing it back to music, but this is how we started the conversation, right? It's how does your legacy show up? And we haven't really discussed it in this, but I don't have children because that's not the legacy I decided that I wanted. I always knew from that age of 15 and probably before that my legacy was always about the thing that I did, how I showed up to serve and who I helped and how I helped them and the business that I created and the way that I did things. And I think also the way that I challenged people. And it's only in later life that I reflected on, I've always been comfortable being a disruptor. I've always been comfortable being out on the ledge by myself. I've always been comfortable in having to take the hit on behalf of a greater good. And that, for me, that's what I want to leave. And that's a really strong internal why. So I think we all have to connect in with that and make it authentic. And I hate that word as I said it, but make it real for us. And if people at the time don't like it, it doesn't mean that history won't remember what you're doing in a very different way to where we are now. I am not cool or popular. I'm not in the in crowds. I'm not hot on social media. Like, I'm not in the mix. But I have a very good suspicion and gut feeling that people in hindsight will hear, see, watch, I have no idea, and go, oh, she was good. And that's it.
I think you're pretty cool.
I think you're cool.
Depends on your definition of cool.
It's the 2nd of May.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at the ballot.
Mm-hmm.
I've got my little pencil or pen attached to a piece of string.
Yes. I'm glad you voted before.
Done it. I've got to put an X in a box.
Mm-hmm.
Why should I vote for Natalie Campbell?
If anyone has got to this point in the interview and they don't know why, then I've done a very bad job. But if you still want to know why, I get it. I get why we are struggling. I get that we're tired. I get that we're fatigued. I get that we are all working flat out and going, is this it? And that might be, is this it from a career perspective, or it might be, is this it from a, and this is all I've got left at the end of the month perspective. I get that. I've lived through that. I've lived on £5 for the week. And in getting that, and in the career that I've built and the things that I've done, I know how to fix those feelings, those blockers and barriers to every person in London waking up and going, today's going to be a good day. I've got something to look forward to. I've got something left. Whether that's energy or money in my pocket. I care deeply about people in a way that I can't even articulate. And some people, I don't know how, but they've managed to decide that I'm quite cold. It's like, no. I'm considered, and maybe my considered way of being and my introversion comes across as cold. But the depth of how much I care about people and cannot see suffering without needing to fix it goes beyond anything I've ever seen or experienced in politics in the UK. And I want, and this is my only bit of hubris in this, I want a young person, anyone, to switch on their TV or their phone or whatever technology it is at the time and go, do you know what? Someone's gonna help me, and it's her. She's gonna help me. And then I help them and they go, people care, people are good. And I say that word good often. But to me, it really is something so simple that we're just missing. And I have that. And I haven't said the policies. You know, I can reel off my 3: good homes, safe streets, better lives. There's a whole manifesto, teamcampbell.london. But for me, that bit's irrelevant because anyone can say that. Is it in here? Am I willing to sacrifice a lot for people that I don't know? Yeah. I'm not self-interested. I'm not doing this because I want to be something else after this. I'm doing this because I want to be the Mayor of London to do this thing to fix London. And if people vote for that, they will get a very different way of experiencing politics because it comes from a very different place. It's a long-winded answer, but that's my motivation.
Loved it. Very powerful. And that's it. We wanted today to be about, our show's about journeys. It's about people's stories and people learning through them. And that's what today was about. And I think if people want to learn more about your policies and your manifesto, they can go and find that. Where can they find it?
teamcampbell.london. Very simple.
That's the website.
That's the website.
And if they're on Instagram, how can they find you?
teamcampbell.london on Instagram. On Instagram, it's teamcampbell.london or Natalie D. Campbell. And then on Twitter and TikTok, it's Natalie D. Campbell.
Okay, got it.
Twitter's called X now, but yeah. I'm old.
Got it. Okay, well, that is the story of how you became both co-CEO of Belu Water and now running for London Mayor. So, 2nd of May. We'll see what happens.
Make sure you vote, yeah? Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
We end the show like we do every show.
With another poem that I made as we were going.
He wrote this as we go along.
Love it.
If you don't ask, you won't get. One theme of this guest's story. A journey of trailblazing business life when you are only halfway to 40. Tackling changes from the root cause can develop long-lasting solutions. To being bold enough to go for new roles that can challenge a board to make improvements. It's not how many times you hit the ground, it's about how many times you can get back up. And to focus on what you know you can affect if you hit a crisis that's tainted with bad luck. To follow your heart to really drive change because it is right and not because it is in fashion. Who knows, if you set the right strategy, you could reach a position that you could have never before imagined.
Love it.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Again, can we have that on the back of the t-shirt?
Yes, the front and the back
Thank you.
t-shirt. I think this is what we're going to have to do now.
Great
like
idea.
a commemorative t-shirt with the poems on.
Or
I'm
hoodie.
here for it.
Or hoodie, yeah.
Mhm.